The silence in our suburban home was the first thing I noticed. It wasn't the peaceful, comfortable quiet of a sleeping house, but a heavy, echoing absence. My husband, Mark, a commercial pilot, had left that morning for a 5-day trip to Singapore. For the first 12 hours, I'd leaned into the cliché of a wife with the house to herself. I'd eaten popcorn for dinner, watched a sappy romantic comedy he'd have grown through, and left my book face down on the coffee table. It was blissful, but now, on the second night, the bliss had faded, replaced by the kind of quiet that makes every little creak and groan of the house sound like a question. My name is Sarah, and Mark and I have been married for 8 years. We live in a charming, slightly older 2-story house in a quiet neighborhood in Ohio. We fell in love with its character, the bay window in the living room, the built-in bookshelves, the mature oak tree in the front yard. We'd been told that character was often a real estate code for things that will eventually break, but for 3 years, it had been nothing but a happy home. That night, I went to bed early, lulled by the rhythmic chirping of the crickets outside. I was deep in a dream about trying to catch a flight. I was hopelessly late for when a sound, alien and intrusive, yanked me into consciousness. It was a low, gurgling groan, followed by a distinct thump that seemed to come from directly beneath me. My heart hammered against my ribs. I fumbled for my phone on the nightstand, the screen blinding me as it lit up. 2:17 a.m. I held my breath, listening so intently I could hear the blood pulsing in my ears. Nothing, just the frantic thumping of my own heart. It's just the house settling, I told myself, repeating the mantra every homeowner learns. The furnace kicking on, an old pipe expanding. I was just about to settle back into my pillow, my rational mind winning over the late-night fear, when I heard it again. This time, it was unmistakable, the sound of rushing water. Not a gentle trickle, but a surging, powerful flow. And it was coming from downstairs. Adrenaline shot through me, cold and sharp. I scrambled out of bed, my bare feet hitting the cool hardwood floor. I didn't bother with a robe, just grabbed the baseball bat Mark kept, optimistically, in the corner of the bedroom and crept out into the hallway. The sound was louder out here, a chaotic symphony of water and something else, a dreadful, percussive dripping. I descended the stairs slowly, my grip tight on the bat. The living room was dark, but a faint, ominous shimmer came from the doorway that led to the basement. We almost never used the basement. It was a half-finished space that housed the laundry, the furnace, and a decade's worth of accumulated storage. The door was always closed. Tonight, a thin sheet of water was seeping out from underneath it, darkening the hardwood of the hallway floor. My stomach dropped. A burst pipe. It had to be. I pushed the door open, and the sound exploded into a roaring waterfall. The single, bare bulb at the bottom of the stairs was on, revealing a scene of pure chaos. A geyser of water was erupting from a pipe near the ceiling, spraying relentlessly onto the concrete floor, which was already covered by at least 2 inches of water. Boxes of our old college textbooks, Christmas decorations, and Mark's comic book collection were sitting in a growing pond. The water was cascading down the foundation walls, and the air was thick with a damp, metallic smell. Panic, pure and unadulterated, seized me. My first instinct was to call Mark. My thumb was hovering over his contact picture, a grinning selfie we'd taken at the lake, when I stopped. What could he do? He was 30,000 feet over the Pacific Ocean, utterly unreachable. Calling him would only make him feel helpless and terrified for me, thousands of miles away. I was on my own. Okay, Sarah, think, I said aloud, my voice trembling. The water main. You need to turn off the water main. I sloshed through the cold water, my pajama pants clinging to my legs. I knew where the main water shut-off valve was, in a dusty corner behind the furnace. Mark had shown me once, during his House Emergency 101 lecture, which I had only half listened to. I found the valve, a stubborn, rusty wheel. I wrapped both hands around it and pulled with all my strength. It didn't budge. I tried again, grunting with the effort, my feet slipping on the wet concrete. Nothing. It was completely seized shut. The water continued to gush, the level rising. I felt a scream of frustration and fear building in my throat. I was failing. The house was flooding, and I couldn't even complete the first, most basic step. I waded back upstairs, my feet leaving wet prints on the floor. I grabbed my laptop from the kitchen table, my hands shaking so badly I could barely type. How to turn off water main if valve is stuck. The search results were a blur of DIY forums and plumbing videos. One video, titled, "Emergency Home Repairs for Beginners," caught my eye. The man in the video had a calm, reassuring voice. If your main valve is stuck, he said, you can use a wrench for leverage. A pipe wrench is best, but an adjustable wrench will work in a pinch. A wrench. Mark had a toolbox in the garage. I ran through the connecting door, flicking on the light, and found the heavy red toolbox. I rifled through it, sending screwdrivers and pliers clattering onto the workbench until I found a large, heavy adjustable wrench. It felt foreign and clumsy in my hands. Back in the basement, the water was now up to my mid-calves. I ignored the icy cold soaking through my pajamas and focused on the valve. I fitted the wrench onto it, the jaws clamping down with a satisfying click. Using the wrench as a lever, I threw my body weight against it. For a heart-stopping moment, it still refused to move. Then, with a loud, grinding shriek of protesting metal, it gave way. I turned it, once, twice, until it would go no further. Abruptly, the roaring geyser from the pipe sputtered and died, leaving behind a deafening silence broken only by the steady drip, drip, drip of residual water. I stood there, chest heaving, soaked and shivering in the sudden quiet. I had done it. The first wave of the battle was over. But the war was just beginning. There was still a basement full of water, and who knew what damage was happening to the structure, the electrical systems, everything. I needed a professional, and I needed one now. I trudged upstairs, a sopping, miserable mess, and picked up my phone. It was 2:45 a.m. Who did you call at 2:45 a.m. for a flooded basement? I googled, 24/7 emergency water damage restoration, and found a company with a local number that promised rapid response, 365 days a year. I pressed call, half expecting it to go to voicemail. A tired but alert male voice answered on the second ring. All-Star Restoration, this is Jake. What's your emergency? The sound of a human voice, professional and calm, nearly broke me. Hi, I stammered, my own voice cracking. My basement is flooding. I have at least 2 inches of water. I just turned off the main water valve, but I don't know what to do. Okay, ma'am, first, take a deep breath. You've done the most important part by stopping the flow. Are you safe? Is there any electrical hazard? I looked around. The power was still on. I think so. The water's just in the basement. Good. I need you to go to your electrical panel and turn off the power to the basement. Do not go back down there until you've done that. Can you do that for me? Yes, I said, feeling a sliver of competence return. I found the electrical panel in the laundry room and, just as Jake instructed, flipped the breakers labeled, basement outlets, and, basement lights. It's done, I reported back. Excellent. Now, I'm dispatching a crew. They'll be there within the hour. In the meantime, if you have a wet-dry vacuum or a shop vac, you can start removing the standing water, but only if you're comfortable and it's safe to do so. Otherwise, just sit tight. We'll handle it. An hour. I thanked him, my voice thick with a gratitude I couldn't fully express, and hung up. I didn't have a shop vac. All I could do was wait. I changed into dry sweatpants and a hoodie, made a cup of tea I didn't want, and sat at the kitchen table, staring at the clock, each minute ticking by with agonizing slowness. The initial adrenaline was gone, leaving me feeling hollow and utterly alone. The silence of the house was no longer just an absence of Mark, it was a vast, empty space I had to fill all by myself. At 3:50 a.m., a large white van with All-Star Restoration emblazoned on the side pulled into my driveway. I watched from the window as 2 men got out. They were dressed in heavy-duty waterproof gear and carried an impressive array of equipment. I opened the front door as they approached. Sarah, the taller of the 2, asked. He looked to be in his late 40s, with a kind, weathered face and a no-nonsense demeanor. I'm Mike. This is Ben. We're here to help. I led them to the basement, feeling a profound sense of relief just having them there. They assessed the situation with a quiet efficiency that was incredibly reassuring. They didn't seem alarmed or judgmental, this was just their job. You've got a burst supply line, Mike said, shining a flashlight at the offending pipe. Probably corroded with age. It happens. You did good getting the main shut off. Let's get this water out and get some dry air moving. For the next several hours, my house was a hub of noisy, industrial activity. They set up powerful submersible pumps to evacuate the bulk of the water, then followed with industrial-grade wet-dry vacuums. After that came the roar of giant air movers and dehumidifiers, which they positioned strategically throughout the basement. The machines were loud, but their noise was a welcome replacement for the sinister sound of rushing water. Mike came upstairs at one point, wiping his forehead with a bandana. The structural damage isn't too bad, he reported. The drywall on the lower part of the walls is a loss, and we'll have to pull up that section of the flooring. But the foundation itself looks fine. The biggest concern now is mold. We need to get everything dry within 24 to 48 hours to prevent it. He handed me a thick stack of paperwork, the work authorization, the insurance forms. My head swam. Insurance. I had to call our insurance company. The sun was coming up, casting a pale, innocent light over the chaos. I called the insurance company and started the laborious process of filing a claim. They were polite but robotic, a series of automated questions and holds. I was put through to a claims adjuster who told me someone would be out to assess the damage in the next 48 hours. It felt like dealing with a faceless, bureaucratic machine. Throughout the morning, I kept checking my phone. Mark had texted when he'd landed in Singapore, "Made it safe. Miss you. How's your solo vacation?" I stared at the message, my thumbs hovering over the screen. I wanted to tell him. I wanted to pour out the whole terrifying story, the noise in the night, the flood, the panic, the plumbers. I wanted his sympathy, his reassurance, his, "I'll handle it," attitude. But I didn't. I typed back, "Glad you landed safe. Miss you too. All good here, just reading and relaxing. Love you." It felt like a lie, but it also felt like a necessary protection, for him, and for me. Telling him would transform this from my problem to our crisis, and he was in no position to help. It would only torture him. This was my burden to carry, at least for now. The restoration crew worked through the day. I brought them coffee and sandwiches, feeling useless but wanting to contribute somehow. I started the grim task of assessing the damage to our stored belongings. A box of my old photo albums was ruined, the pictures fused together into a pulpy, colorful mess. I felt a pang of loss, but it was strangely muted, overshadowed by the sheer scale of the practical problem. The next 2 days were a blur of noise, phone calls, and decisions. The insurance adjuster came, a brisk woman with a clipboard who took pictures and made notes. Mike from All-Star was my guide, explaining the remediation process to her, using terms like moisture mapping and antimicrobial treatment. I listened, learning more about my own house than I ever thought I would need to. I had to find a plumber to permanently repair the burst pipe. Mike recommended a few, and I spent hours on the phone, getting quotes, scheduling appointments. I chose one, a friendly older man named Frank who came the next day, shook his head at the old galvanized piping, and replaced the entire section with new copper, all while telling me stories about the plumbing in the old houses in the neighborhood. Through it all, I was the point person. I was the one signing the documents, approving the work, writing the checks from our joint account after confirming with Mike that the insurance would reimburse us. I was the one who dealt with the constant, deafening hum of the drying equipment. I was the one who slept, or tried to, through the noise, who ate takeout because the kitchen felt like a command center. A strange thing happened during those days. The initial helplessness began to fade, replaced by a gritty, determined competence. I wasn't just Mark's wife. I was Sarah, the homeowner who had handled a crisis. I had diagnosed the problem with Google's help, executed the initial fix, mobilized the professionals, and was now managing the recovery. The fear was still there, a constant, low-level hum of anxiety about the cost, the extent of the damage, whether I was making the right choices. But it was no longer paralyzing. It was a fuel. On the 4th day, the restoration crew came to remove the dryers. The sudden silence was almost as jarring as the initial flood had been. The basement was dry, if scarred. The lower halves of the walls were stripped down to the studs, and a section of the concrete floor was bare. But it was dry. It smelled of clean, conditioned air instead of damp and decay. Mike did a final moisture check and gave me a thumbs up. "You're in the clear," he said. "The structure is saved. Now it's just a matter of rebuilding. Your insurance has approved the repairs for the drywall and flooring. You'll just need to find a contractor for that." I thanked him, feeling a surge of emotion that was part gratitude, part pride. I had navigated the storm. That evening, the house was quiet again. But this time, the silence felt different. It wasn't an empty absence, it was a peaceful, earned calm. I felt a deep, resonant sense of ownership over this space, over this life, that I had never felt before. I had always seen our home as ours, a shared project, but in a way, I had let Mark be the foreman. Now, I knew every pipe in the basement, every circuit in the panel. I had fought for this place and won. Mark was due home the next day. I thought about how I would tell him. The moment he walked in, he would see the signs, the displaced items from the basement piled in the garage, maybe a lingering smell of industrial cleaners. I wouldn't greet him with the crisis at the door. I would let him put his bags down. I would hug him, long and hard, and feel the solid, wonderful reality of him. And then, over a glass of wine, I would tell him the story. I wouldn't tell it as a tragedy. I would tell it as an adventure. I would tell him about the terrifying noise in the night, about my comedic struggle with the wrench, about the calm voice of Jake on the phone, and the impressive efficiency of Mike and his crew. I would tell him about the ruined photo albums with a sigh, but also about the newfound knowledge I had gained. I would show him the repaired pipe, point to the stripped-down walls, and explain the plan for the rebuild. I realized this wasn't a story about a disaster that happened while my husband was away. It was a story about what I discovered about myself when I was left to my own devices. It was about finding a strength I didn't know I possessed, a capability that had been there all along, waiting for a burst pipe to set it free. The front door opened the following afternoon. Mark walked in, looking tired from his long flight but smiling when he saw me. "Honey, I'm home," he called out, dropping his suitcase. I walked over and wrapped my arms around him, breathing in the familiar scent of his jacket. "Welcome home," I whispered, my voice muffled against his shoulder. "I missed you so much." He held me tight. "I missed you too." "So, what did I miss? Anything exciting happen?" I pulled back slightly, a small, confident smile on my face. The fear was gone. The anxiety was managed. All that was left was the quiet certainty of someone who knows they can handle whatever life throws at them. "Well," I said, taking his hand. "Let me get you a drink. I have a bit of a story to tell you."